How's it going, everyone? Nick here once again for What Game Now with another Theme Force video for you. This one is on the Dark Menagerie, a Grymkin Theme Force. Before we get going, if you have not seen the Theme Force introductory video, go watch that right now. We're going to assume you've watched it, and a lot of what we're going to talk about doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense without that video. So, come back when you have, if you are, or if you have already. Let's get started. So what is the Dark Menagerie? This requires a bit of a history lesson. The Grymkin are led by a group of transformed humans called Defiers. At their fundamental core, the Defiers are still human. They've just ascended to a somewhere between mortal and godlike state. The way they ended up this way was because they were flung into the underworld called Grymkin by the god Menoth. The reason why is because they rejected his laws when he came to humanity and tried to force his worship upon them. These Defiers rejected his laws, at least in part or in whole, and were flung still alive into the underworld. This is a tiny problem. The underworld is not intended for the living, it is intended only for the dead. And very quickly, Defiers found one immediate side effect. Their nightmares and fears came to life and hunted them. So each individual Defier has fears. Those came to life and actually would physically attack the Defiers. And this went on for centuries or millennia, or even the Defiers don't actually know how long. Eventually, though, the Defiers came to realize that Grymkin is not just their prison, but it is also their domain. They learned to harness the underworld and the powers within it, to bend them to their own will, and ultimately use them to fight back. This power led them to eventually control their very own nightmares. These nightmares are the war beasts the Grymkin Defiers use in battle. So this theme force is a collection of those war beasts and the associated support elements that a Defier brings along with them to reap the world of those they believe are wrong. Couple comments here. Each war beast is actually a combined being made out of the Defier's own nightmares. Not just one, but all of them. And they're actually under control of the Defiers, but if they ever break loose, they have a tendency to attack the Defiers. And also, it's important to keep in mind why this works, is the Defiers are still human. They have ascended beyond normal humanity, but they are still at their core human. They have fears and desires. Because of that, they still have nightmares, and those can still create new war beasts. That's where these come from. So there's a number of standardized ones that they see. And the Dark Menagerie is the Defier going to war, bringing their own nightmares and their own horrors with them. All right, let's get into the theme force proper. So on the right, you can see the Dark Menagerie theme force. A couple of points I want to mention. It is not just a war beast theme. There are a few units allowed. Right off the bat, though, before we go into the units, I want to mention all the Grymkin Warlocks and all the Grymkin War Beasts are available in this theme force. The Grymkins have no character War Beasts, so that's kind of a moot point. But ultimately, all of the Grymkin Warlocks, all of the War Beasts are available. The three units you have access to are the Dreadrots, which are the pumpkin head guys. They're a low-cost, low-speed melee unit. They're meant to be cheap. They hit reasonably hard, but they die to a stiff breeze. The Malady Man, which is a very interesting support piece, he supports not just units, he can make the Dreadrots faster, but has a few other key abilities that can help out a Grymkin army. The Twilight Sisters, whose primary mechanic is the ability to bring back lost models, in the case of the Dreadrots. From there we have the Solos. Baron Tunglick, the Lord of Warts, is a support character. He is the Grymkin Warlock attachment. His job is to assist you in casting spells. He allows you to upkeep a spell for free. And he has an ability called Parlay, which prevents enemies from making attacks while within a certain radius of him. We have the Glimmer Imp. The Glimmer Imp has the ability to hand out the blind effect to some models, which essentially renders them completely useless. Although it's a very interesting to note that most of the things that the Glimmer Imp can blind can also shake blind. If he can't blind them, it's usually because he killed them and those are the things that tend to not be able to shake blind, so it's kind of a strange model. Gremlin swarms, which on the surface don't seem to do that much, but we'll get to them in the bonuses in a moment. Lady Cariana Rose. Lady Cariana Rose is a support character. She brings a damage buff to your war beasts called Enrage. Weird Wendell, the Grymkin Wrangler, or the Gremlin Wrangler. We have no idea what this model does at the time of the recording of this video because he's not released yet. And then we have the Death Knell, and then the standard battery of 1 minion solo and 1 minion unit. It is interesting to note with Grymkin that there are only 2 mercenary or minion models that work for the Grymkin. Eilish Garrity, Rogue Occultists, and the Hermit of Hanghold. Both of which are actually quite useful, but you get one or the other. So, a few comments about this. We actually have a unit, and there's a reason why this unit's in there. And it will become, like I said, once we get to talking about the Theme Force and the War Beasts in particular, you understand why this unit's there. They're essentially there to die. Other than that, this is a very generic Theme Force. There's not a lot of strange inclusions, aside from the fact that they have almost no minion options to actually pick from. Requisition, there's 3 of them. 2 Crabbit Lesser War Beasts. They come in pairs for 1 requisition, so in theory you could have 6 of them for free. The Crabbit is a low-cost war beast. It doesn't have a lot of hit points, but its big claim to fame is it has the ability Shield Guard, so it can eat shots for your guys as they cross the table. 2 Gremlin Swarm solos, and 1 small or medium-based Grymkin solo. This is just the generic catch-all. This would be the Baron, Rose, Weird Wendell. If you want a Glimmerimp, you can do a Glimmerimp. Before I go into explaining the requisition, I want to mention the special rules real fast. The field allowance of Gremlin Swarms in this army becomes 4. Normally they are 2. So that 2 Gremlin Swarms solo option, you can actually take that twice in this Theme Force because you can have field allowance 4. The next ability, though, is really important. Gremlin Swarm solos gain Serenity. At the beginning of your control phase, before leeching, so before you pull Fury off, you can remove 1 Fury point from a friendly faction war beast within 1 inch of a model with Serenity. You can trigger this multiple times off of 1 Gremlin Swarm. So you put 1 Gremlin Swarm in the middle of a bunch of war beasts, you can potentially pull 3-4 Fury off in 1 turn. It's got to be 1 from each different war beast. And it's worth noting that it is possible to have the same model benefit from multiple Gremlin Swarms. So, very powerful. Very useful. This is what makes the Gremlin Swarms very attractive, because normally the Gremlins don't actually do that much. They're really good against construct models, but other than that, they really don't do that much. The last bonus, each non-trooper model, so not models in units. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Those are, trooper model is any model that's in a unit. So each non-trooper model is anybody who's not within a unit. That can gain corpse tokens, begins the game with 1 corpse token. This is a phenomenal set of special rules, even though it doesn't inherently seem obvious. Corpses. There are 3 critical models that like corpses in this Theme Force. 2 of the heavy war beasts, the Skin and Moans, which gets more powerful and better armor with each corpse. The Cage Rager, which actually allows you to cast spells through it when it has a corpse token on it. And the Death Knell, which has a aura of +2 armor that is based off of the number of corpses it has. This is huge. And you're going to be able to get more corpses from your Dreadrots, because as the Dreadrots die, they get dumped into the Death Knell if they're in the right place. And then the Death Knell can hand that off to your other war beasts. If you play your cards right, your Dreadrots, between the Dreadrots and the Twilight Sisters, are a near infinite supply of corpse tokens, which is really powerful. Alright, on to the models within the Theme Force. Warlocks, long story short, they're all really good. The only one that is slightly less good is the Heretic. He has a powerful set of abilities and a powerful set of spells. Literally the only downside to this guy is his Trump Arcana requires warrior models, which is him and Gremlin Swarms and Rose and the Baron. That's it. The War Beasts and the Battle Engine don't count. So it's a little bit harder to trigger his abilities. Or his Arcana, at least. Child, Dreamer, and King are all very much at home in this Theme Force, as is Zavana Aga, the Gatekeeper, who I totally forgot to put on the slide, I just realized. they're all phenomenal in this theme force. They all get a lot out of it. The Child, because she likes a lot of heavy war beasts. The Dreamer, to abuse Manifest Destiny. The King, because his ability triggers off of war beasts getting damaged. You'll often see him taking a lot of Kravits. And Zavana Aga, she likes war beasts. Between Boundless Charge and Respawn, she can get a lot of mileage out of them. And she's got a lot of support abilities. The Wanderer is an interesting one because while he is good in this theme force, he's often seen in the other Grymkin theme force, Bump in the Night. And the reason why is there's a few models available in Bump in the Night that really magnify his abilities. So while he's not a bad Dark Menagerie caster, he's still really good. He's often seen in Bump in the Night instead. So if you had to pick at this point, Child, Dreamer, or Zavana Aga would be my choice. The King is really good, but is very hard to learn. The Heretic is very straightforward, but you're not always going to get everything out of him. And the Wanderer, fairly good, but again, he actually shines better somewhere else. War Beasts, there's not a lot of Grymkin War Beasts if you really go through and look at the options. All of the heavies are phenomenal purchases in this theme force, and they often come in pairs, and sometimes triplets, in the case of the Clockatrice. Kravits are a near mandatory element because they help your army become very resistant to shooting. One pair of Kravits as a requisition option is about standard in this theme force. The Rattler tends to show up with casters like the Dreamer and Zavana Aga, who have a hit fix for it. Helps it hit its target more often, get the most out of Berserk and Overtake. The Gorehound is a solid choice because it allows you to contest a zone a long way away, and it's fairly hard to remove. The only one you don't see that often is the Frightmare. And it's not so much because the Frightmare is bad. It is the least interesting of the war beasts, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It's often just the first thing cut for points. Its Animus isn't that exciting. Its gun is okay, but especially if you're taking Clockatrices, you have spray attacks to clear out random models. It's in this strange position of it doesn't really do that much in this theme force. So takeaways here, heavies are good, Kravits are good. If you want to play Zavana Aga, the Old Witch, or the Dreamer, I'd recommend a Rattler, and a Gorehound is generally not a bad purchase either. Units. There's 3 of them available, and they're kind of all designed to work together. The Dreadrots are cheap and a good source for corpses. The Death Knell just collects it when they die, if they're within a certain radius of the Death Knell. The Death Knell fills up on corpses, and it has a real close special delivery. It can hand them off to nearby friendly models. So those Dreadrots, which you usually can't get corpses on your own skin and bones by killing your own guys, you can actually do that kind of with the Death Knell. Once the Dreadrots die, they go to the Death Knell, and the Death Knell can feel whatever you want. Normally, a Skin and Bones has to kill something to power up the Death Knell. When in conjunction with some Dreadrots means you don't have to do that. The Twilight Sisters, they have a couple of abilities. The biggest one is that they can return dead guys, which is really nice. So it means that you can keep a constant stream of Dreadrots on the table, which means that you get a constant stream of corpses going back into your Death Knell. The Malady Man is a very interesting model because he both disrupts and debuffs the opponent. He has an ability that makes them stationary if they end within a certain distance of them. The Monkey has a rule that takes off your attack rolls when the Monkey's around, and he makes the Dreadrots faster. So, not a bad choice. None of them are especially common, though, in this theme force. Again, not because they're bad, but why would you not take more War Beasts? Especially with the Gremlins, there's not really a problem with the Fury management. So why not just take 6 or 7 War Beasts, especially heavies? The only exception is the King of Nothing, who likes to take a unit of Dreadrots, even a 6-man unit, because of his Santa Fate spell. He can jump around after he casts spells by removing friendly models. Solos and the Battle Engine. I lump these together because there's not a whole lot of them. The Battle Engine is pretty common. It's very rare to see a Dark Menagerie that doesn't have a Battle Engine, although they do exist. Main points in favor of the Battle Engine is it helps with corpse economy by handing out corpses, and it has the most generous corpse collection rules. It has an armor buff, which makes your guys more resilient to shooting and melee attacks. And I forgot to list it here, but it actually doesn't have a terrible melee attack. It can get the job, it can knock out something that's low health if you need it removed. It's also really big, so it can contest a lot of things at one time, and has a decent number of hit points. Solos-wise, Lady Kyriana Rose is a phenomenal choice. She has the ability Enrage, which gives your target war beast +2 strength, which is huge damage buff. You can combine that with the Child or the Dreamer. Now, all of a sudden, you have a Skin and Moans or a Cage Rager pumping well above its weight class. And when she dies, your guys get bonuses. Baron Tunglick has 3 key abilities. Number 1, he lets you have a free upkeep at the start of the turn if he's within a certain range of your caster. He has the ability to cast some spells from your Warcaster's card, from your Warlock's card. And he has a rule called Parlay. And the way Parlay works is when he uses it, enemy models within his command range, so they can enter later and enter his command range, cannot make melee attacks. There's a few restrictions on it, but that's a really potent ability, especially against some armies. Last up is the Glimmer Imp. There's nothing wrong with these guys, but he's not terribly common. Hitting isn't usually a problem that the Grymkin have, especially with Manifest Destiny, or the free charges mean they can boost when they need it critically. And its ability to blind enemy models is useful, but not against the things it's likely to be able to do it against. So, it's okay. However, a Battle Engine, Rose, and the Baron are all amazing. I did omit Gremlin Swarms on this page. 4 Gremlin Swarms is just stock and standard for this theme force. More often than not, the requisition option at 75 points is a pair of Krabbits and 4 Gremlin Swarms. And that should kind of be obvious by now with this emphasis on War Beasts and a lot of that. And the Gremlins are going to be a big deal with that. The other thing that the Gremlins do is they're incorporeal. So by being incorporeal, they're actually immune to most attacks, which means you can go plop these guys in a zone, and there's a decent chance your opponent cannot actually kill them, which is kind of powerful. All right, building the theme. There's no such thing as a unit-heavy Dark Menagerie. There's just not enough support and not enough units to make it work. You can put the Twilight Sisters, 2 Malady Men, 3 into Dreadrots out there. This isn't a terrible start, but why are you not playing Bump in the Night at that point? So we're going Beast Heavy. Usually starts with 5 heavies. Yes, you heard that right, 5 heavies. 1 of each, and then double up as you see fit. The Skin and Moans and the Clockatrice are favorites for doubling up on. However, some casters don't mind having the second Cage Rager. The Dreamer is a really good example. If you have the Baron, though, you might be able to leave the Cage Rager at home. Requisition options, 4 Gremlins and a pair of Krabbits. That's what you get by default. Death Knell is usually fairly common. If you don't have a Death Knell, it's usually replaced with a couple Lights. Rose and the Baron are in almost every list for the damage buff and the spell support. And pretty much everything else is kind of rare. You don't usually see it. This theme force is predominantly what War Beasts do you want to bring, not what does the rest of your army look like. The center of this is 5 to 6 War Beasts. What do you want? So when you're building this theme force, pick a caster. Any of them work. I would recommend the Child, the Old Witch 3, Heretic with a little asterisk by it. His trump doesn't quite trigger as often as you'd really like it to. And the Dreamer. Start there, grab 5 heavies, at least 1 of each, probably a second Skin and Moans, and certainly a second Clockatrice. Krabbits, Gremlin Swarms, Death Knell, Rose, and the Baron, and that's actually a pretty stock and standard list that works with just about any caster. You could make that work with anybody. So if you want a really efficient way to buy 2 lists for a tournament, Dark Menagerie is actually one of the go-to favorites. You can literally play the exact same list with another caster, and it works just fine. So with that, that brings us to the end of the Dark Menagerie. This theme force, scroll back here so you can look at it. This is the standard one you see Grymkin in. Bump in the Night's really good. Dark Menagerie is the entry point for Grymkin. It's very common even afterwards. I go to a tournament, I see Grymkin, at least one of their lists is going to be Dark Menagerie. The other one might be Dark Menagerie, or it might be Bump in the Night, but certainly one of them is a Dark Menagerie build. Pick your caster, start with about 5 heavies, grab some Krabbits and 4 Gremlin Swarms. The Death Knell, the only guy who doesn't really like it is the King. and then grab Rose and the Baron and just have at it. Couple downsides with this theme force: it is very predictable. It's very good, but it's very predictable. If your opponent is prepared for Dark Menagerie, changing caster doesn't change it that much. It changes how you cover the field, but your opponent's response is still going to be, or your opponent's answers are still going to be very similar. The other major downside is, especially if you're running a Death Knell, it can be very hard sometimes to spread out enough to affect the scenario. So one thing you're going to have to learn with this theme force is how to work with the scenario game if you're playing a brick. Funny story, the first time I played this in a tournament, I lost on the end of the second player's second turn because I didn't pay attention. And I knew what my opponent's stuff did, and as soon as he pointed out, I'm like, oh yeah, you actually do just win right here. And it was just because I wasn't aggressive enough with it. The brick, as we call it, this very defensive formation, you don't have to keep it on turn 1 and even turn 2 to an extent. It is much better to get up the field, get into the zones. Don't move at the pace of the slowest model. Go, 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 go. You can build the formation as you need it later. So I really recommend this theme force if you're going to play Grymkin. Start here, grab 5 heavies of your choice, make sure you get 1 of each. I'd recommend a second Clockatrice, and I'd recommend a second Skin and Moans for most casters. Pick your caster, grab a Death Knell, Baron, Rose, 4 Gremlin Swarms, and some Kravits, and you're good to go. And it's actually also a really good theme force for testing out the different casters in, because the theme force is very good, but it acts differently with the different casters. With the Child, it's a very axe-to-face, I guess is the best way to describe it. She's a very blunt instrument. You're going to get your War Beast, you're going to get a lot of them going, and they're going to beat the crap out of something. The Heretic is going to do that, but has a little more control-y effects. So he's going to, he'll buff one guy really well, and then he'll prevent the opponent from acting in certain other areas. The Dreamer is a very tricksy caster who messes around with how far your guys can go because of Abyssal Gate, and Manifest Destiny helps her against high defense targets, more so than a lot of the other casters. Also, the pop back here, you can see them, the Phantasms. She can pop those in as guys die, and you can remove them from play, but she can just summon a new one. They are outstanding pieces. The Wanderer, you get a highly defensive build with the Wanderer. You cast Starcrossed, you set him behind your Death Knell, you set your beasts in front of the Death Knell. Make sure that they are within 10 inches of the Wanderer. And the reason the front of their base is within 10 inches of the Wanderer, and the reason why is he has a 12-inch control area, which is respectable. It's average. He has Starcrossed. So when you attack stuff in his control area, it gets bonus defense dice. The exact formation, I don't have the exact spell in front of me, which is a mistake, I'm sorry, but he helps your guys become more defensive, which can be really annoying on some of these Grymkin War Beasts, because a lot of this stuff is randomly defense 13 or higher. The Cage Rager's defense 10, but both the Clockatrice and the Skin and Moans are defense 13, which means they actually get missed a lot under Starcrossed. And then you have an armor buff, so even when they hit you, it doesn't do that much. Really good ability. Zavana Aga, she plays a style between the Child and the Dreamer. She can get good ranges out of her stuff, but her damage buff is not as open. And then lastly, the King of Nothing is a very strange build. And he has a lot of heavies. He's going to run extra Clockatrice, or extra Kravits to cover what he's doing. And all in all, you just end up with a very flexible theme force. So, have a good one.
Hey, this is Dave. If you like what we're doing here at What Game Now, go ahead and click on one of the videos which should be on either side of me, or click right in the middle and go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell once you subscribe so that you know when we have new videos. Please go ahead and share us with your friends. Let everybody know that we're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for all of our subscribers already. And we look forward to bringing you more content every chance that we get.